I used to think having a gifted older brother was something to be proud of. Like one of those badges you wear around at school. My brother goes to MIT, or he won the science fair 3 years in a row, except in my case, it was all anyone ever talked about. My name's Evan. I'm 24 now, but this story starts a few years ago back when I was 19 and freshly dropped out of college, sitting at the kitchen table with a notebook full of half-baked startup ideas and a family that looked at me like I'd joined a cult. To be fair, I wasn't exactly making a compelling case for myself at the time. I had just left my second year of computer science at a mid-tier college because I realized I couldn't take another semester of theory-heavy lectures while my brain was spinning with real-world ideas I actually wanted to build. It wasn't a dramatic exit, no big explosion, no viral post about leaving the system. Just a quiet decision that I'd rather try and fail on my own terms than spend 4 more years preparing to maybe start afterward. But my family, they took it personally, especially my brother Kyle. Kyle is 3 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, he's been the golden child, perfect SATs, full ride to Stanford summer internships at places like Tesla and Google, and a LinkedIn page that probably gives venture capitalists goosebumps. My parents worshipped the ground he walked on, and I mean that literally. There's still a framed photo of Kyle shaking hands with Elon Musk in our living room. Meanwhile, I think the only framed photo of me is a blurry elementary school soccer picture stuck on the fridge with a cracked magnet. When I told them I was leaving college, Dad just sighed and walked out of the room. Mom said, "Are you having a breakdown?" But Kyle laughed. Actually laughed. He leaned over the kitchen counter, still in his perfectly pressed dress shirt from some networking event he'd just come from, and said, "So, what? You're going to build the next Facebook from Grandma's garage?" He didn't even try to hide the smirk. I could feel my ears burning, but I didn't say anything. Not yet. That night I stayed up sketching out the rough framework of an app I'd been thinking about for weeks. A platform to help independent tutors monetize and scale their services without needing to go through giant companies like Udemy or Coursera. It was a niche idea, but I saw something in it. I had a few friends who tutored on the side and always complained about how much these platforms took in fees. I wanted to build something lean, simple, and peer-to-peer. For the next 3 months, I lived like a ghost in that house. I coded during the day, watched tutorials at night, and only emerged from my room for food and coffee. I was broke, jobless, and rapidly losing the respect of everyone around me. Kay would pop by every couple of weeks and ask how my tech empire was going with that smug tilt of his head, like he couldn't wait to see me crash and burn. But I kept working. Eventually, I got something usable, not pretty, but functional. I called it Clarity Link. I even onboarded a couple of real tutors from a Reddit thread just to test it. They liked it. They actually liked it. One of them messaged me and said it felt more human than anything else they'd used. That one line kept me going for another month. Then one day, Kyle knocked on my door, which was weird. He never came to my room. Usually he barked from the hallway or texted like I was some distant cousin he barely tolerated. But this time he came in with a mug of coffee and a sudden interest in what I'd been working on. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe he was trying to be supportive for once. He asked questions, good ones actually, about scalability, payment processing, what market I was targeting, how I planned to deal with regulations around online education. I was surprised. It felt like, for the first time, he saw something in me that wasn't just a screw-up younger brother. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. Looking back, I should have been more careful. Over the next few weeks, KL started showing up more often. At first with casual curiosity, then with feedback, then ideas. He mentioned he was working on a thesis project for one of his graduate classes that kind of aligned with some of what I was doing. He asked if he could look at my pitch deck. Not to steal, of course, but just to see how I was structuring it. I want to give you pointers, he said. I was hesitant, but this was my brother. I mean, we had our differences, sure, but we shared bunk beds for 10 years. We used to team up to sneak cookies at night. I figured maybe this is what growing up looks like. Maybe he's finally seeing me as an equal. I shared the deck. I even walked him through the slides. Big mistake. A few weeks later, he stopped replying to my texts. At first, I assumed he got busy. He was graduating soon, probably swamped with finals and job interviews. But then I saw a post on LinkedIn, Kyle's LinkedIn, that made my stomach drop. It was a photo of him standing in front of a whiteboard mid-pitch in one of those startup incubator meeting rooms with the caption, excited to introduce PeerLink, a platform connecting educators with learners in a more equitable, decentralized way, built with passion. Stay tuned. PeerLink. PeerLink. My app was called ClarityLink. I clicked through the slideshow he posted. My hands were shaking. It was my pitch, my exact pitch, word for word, even the diagrams, even the tagline. Decentralizing education, one lesson at a time. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, mouth dry. I scrolled to the comments. Genius idea, Kyle. Brilliant execution. Can't wait to invest. One of the top comments was from a former Stanford professor. Let me know when your seed round opens. My vision blurred. I spent the rest of the night pacing my room like a maniac, flipping through my notes, my prototypes, everything I'd built. I knew what this meant. If Kyle was presenting this in a formal incubator setting, it meant he'd already filed the pitch under his name. Maybe even the IP, maybe more. But the worst part, my parents were proud when I brought it up to them the next morning, told them that Kyle had copied my project. They acted like I was being petty. Mom said, you should be flattered. He thought it was good enough to pursue. Dad added, you should have done more with it. You let it sit on your laptop for months. I was stunned. Wait, I said, you're seriously okay with this? You're okay with your son stealing from your other son? Dad didn't even blink. He's making it happen. That's what matters. I wanted to scream, but instead I just left. I packed up my things, drove 3 hours to a friend's couch, and didn't look back. That was the day I realized something important. Kyle wasn't just arrogant or entitled. He was dangerous. And if he thought he could steal from me and get away with it, he had no idea who he was dealing with. And I had no idea then just how far he would take it or how far I'd have to go to get it all back. I spent the first night on my friend Ben's couch staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd had with Kyle over the last few months, like a detective combing through surveillance footage. Every little moment that had felt odd or off, his sudden interest in my mock-ups, the overly detailed questions, the not so innocent, just curious texts now took on a new light. He hadn't been curious. He'd been casing the place, and I'd handed him the keys with a smile, then didn't ask too many questions, just offered me some old hoodies and cleared a corner of his apartment for my monitor and keyboard setup. I didn't tell him the full story. At first, it felt too humiliating. What was I supposed to say? Yeah, my older brother tricked me into revealing all my startup plans and then presented them as his own at Stanford, like he was Tony Stark giving a TED Talk. But I couldn't avoid it for long. I was spiraling, eating, go to take a bite of cereal, and suddenly lose my appetite, open my laptop too, write code and just stare at the blinking cursor. Every day, I'd see another PureLink post pop up on my feed. Kyle, with his polished jawline, holding coffee at some panel talking about reshaping the education economy. Like he didn't steal the entire concept from me. He even wore the same damn blazer I remembered from my high school graduation, as if he hadn't changed at all, just upgraded the mask. Eventually, I told Ben everything. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, just staring at me for a few seconds. Then he whistled. Dude, he said, this is like evil genius level, and not in a fun way. I nodded. Yeah, but like you have proof, right? That stopped me. Proof. I had my original GitHub commits. I had timestamps on documents, early builds, even Slack messages from the 2 tutors I'd on board during my prototype phase. I had sketches in my notebook, but somehow none of it felt solid. Not in a courtroom sense. Kay was clever. Ide shared some of that with him in conversation, not via email or doc invites. And he'd repackaged everything with just enough changes, different name, slicker UI, fancier buzzwords. It was like he'd watched my house being built, brick by brick, then constructed his own on the same foundation, but painted it a different color and called it original. Still, I started compiling everything. Backups, screenshots, dated prototypes. I told myself I was just protecting my work, but deep down, I already knew I wasn't going to just let this go. Not anymore. Meanwhile, Kyle's fame was growing. He got into a high-profile startup accelerator, one of those flashy Silicon Valley darlings that loves throwing buzzwords like disruption and impact around. He did interviews, podcasts, even got featured in a top 30, under 30 article on some startup newsletter that my mom printed out and laminated. I kid you not. She put it on the fridge right next to my 3rd grade art project and a coupon for frozen lasagna. She called me that day. Did you see what your brother accomplished? I did, I said flatly. You must be so proud of him. You always looked up to him. Remember? I stayed quiet. Then she added, maybe you could help him out. Be part of the team. He said you were interested in education tech, right? That's when I hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone like it had just burst into flames in my hand. It wasn't just that they didn't believe me. It was that they didn't care. How could have announced tomorrow that he also invented the light bulb and cured polio, and my parents would have just asked if he needed help filing the patents. I wanted to disappear, but something else was happening inside me too, like a slow burn. Anger, sure, but something sharper too. Not rage, focus. That was the day I decided I wasn't going to wait for justice. I was going to make it. Still, I didn't know how. Not yet. I started with something small, reaching out to those original tutors I had on board. One of them, Mari, remembered me immediately. She even still had our chat logs and a screenshot of the Clarity Link prototype I'd sent her. The timestamp predated any of Kyle's activity. She said she'd noticed a similar platform being promoted on LinkedIn and thought it looked awfully familiar. I told her I was building a case and might need a statement. I'm in. She said without hesitation, that guy gives me the ick anyway. One small win. But the next day I got an email from a Stanford address I didn't recognize. Subject line, PureLink founders. Request urgent. It was from someone named Rishishi Patel, Kyle's co-founder. Apparently, Kyle had brought him in recently as technical lead, and Rishi had started poking around in the back end systems, cleaning up the architecture, and prepping for a product demo to some angel investors. Only he found something. The email was short but loaded. Hey Evan, you don't know me, but I think we should talk soon. It's about Some files in the early build of Pure. Link that don't make sense. My heart thudded it in my chest. I called him the second I finished reading. Richishi picked up right away, and the first thing he said was, "Did you work on this platform before Kyle launched it?" I paused. "Yes, I built the whole thing." "Why?" "I thought so," he said, "because some of the code comments there, signed Evan_dev and date back to before Kyle even got accepted into the incubator. Some modules are identical to a GitHub repo I found under your name." He sounded nervous. I didn't want to believe it, he continued, but I ran the diffs myself. The entire initial build was forked from your project. He changed the repo name, rewrote the comments, and wiped the commit history. Sloppy job. Honestly, I was silent. "I don't know what you want to do with this," he added, "but I'm out. I'm not risking my name for some guy who built his house on someone else's blueprints." I thanked him, then I hung up, then I screamed into a pillow because this changed everything. This wasn't just inspiration theft. This was code theft. Actual verifiable IP infringement. Now, I had the proof, but then not even 24 hours later, Kay called me. He never called me, not once since all of this had started. His voice was weirdly calm, like the kind of calm a surgeon has right before delivering bad news. So he said, "Rishi told me he reached out." I didn't answer. He sighed. "Look, I get it. You're upset. I may have overstepped, okay, but the product's already out there now. I've done the hard work of scaling it. The team's growing. Investors are excited. If this becomes a legal thing, nobody wins. Is that supposed to be an apology?" I asked. "I'm saying," he said, "maybe there's another way." Silence. Then he added, "I'll give you a cut. 5% equity, maybe. Even 10. I actually laughed. Laughed. Out loud. 10%. I said, "You think this is about money? You're not going to get anything otherwise." He said, "No one will believe you. I've got lawyers, a company, a name. You have some code on your laptop and a few emails. Come on, Evan, be smart." He said it with that same tone he used to use when we were kids, like I was the stubborn little brother refusing to give up the controller after losing in Mario Kart. Like he was doing me a favor. I hung up on him too, but this time I didn't feel helpless. I felt like a loaded slingshot. And Kyle, he just pulled the band all the way back. A week later, I got my chance. I'd been quietly sending out a few feelers. Nothing loud, just some direct messages to startup blogs, a couple of tweets with vague threads about plagiarized code. In one private email to the Startup Accelerator peer, Link was part of most people ignored me, but one blog bit. It was small, run by this journalist named Tanya, who had a column called Silicon Valley Shadows, where she did exposes on shady practices in the tech world. She called me at 10 p.m. on a Thursday and listened to the whole story, every detail, every file, every screenshot. By the time I was done, she was silent for a long time. Then she said, "You know what? The craziest part is what? This is going to be huge." She was right, but I didn't know then that Carl still had one more betrayal up his sleeve. Something so cold-blooded it would make everything before it feel like child's play. And when it happened, it broke something in me. I wish I could tell you that after that phone call with Tanya, the journalist, everything started turning around, that justice came knocking. Kay got exposed, and I walked out of the shadows triumphant. But that's not how these stories go. Not in real life. In real life, things get worse before they get better. It started with the article Tanya published it a week later under the headline, "The Brother Behind the Code: How a Stanford Startup May Have Been Built on stolen work. It was long, detailed, and filled with screenshots. She quoted timestamps from my original commits, Mari's testimonial, Rishi's code diffs. She included redacted emails, even a side-by-side comparison of PureLink and Clarity Link's UI elements. There was no denying it, and for a moment I thought, that was it. The match had been struck. Now all I had to do was watch the fire spread. But Kyle was ready. The same morning the article dropped, PureLink's official Twitter account posted a slick press statement. We are aware of false claims circulating online and take intellectual property accusations seriously. PureLink is built entirely on original work, and our legal team is handling the matter. We remain committed to empowering educators around the world. False claims. He called my work false claims. I read that statement a dozen times, each word hitting like a slap. And then came the calls, not from family. No, they stayed suspiciously quiet, but from investors, from people I didn't know, asking for proof, for clarification, for a reasonable explanation. Some were polite, some weren't. One VC left a voicemail saying, I should be careful with the allegations I'm making unless I want to get sued into the dirt. I saved that voicemail because it marked the start of the worst month of my life. Suddenly I was the thief, the jealous dropout, the nobody trying to ride the coattails of a Stanford golden boy. Reddit threads tore me apart. Twitter trolls quoted the article just to mock it. Tanya even reached out to apologize, said some of her editors were getting pressure from high places to pull it. The article stayed up, but it stopped gaining traction, and that's when the silence hit. No one else picked up the story. No legal action came. No support from Platform Forum. The tutors I had on board got scared and stopped replying. Even Rishishi ghosted me after a week. I went dark for a while, stopped coding, stopped leaving the apartment. I barely talked to Ben, even though he was trying. He'd knock gently, leave coffee outside my door, check in with texts that I never answered. But I couldn't bring myself to face the world. I wasn't just humiliated. I was empty. This thing I'd built from scratch. Clarity Link. It wasn't just an app. It was me. My first real attempt at building something that mattered. I had poured my soul into it. Every bug I fixed, every line of code I wrote while everyone else was sleeping. It was all me, and Kyle took it, not just the code. He took the pride, the validation, the right to say, I made this. And now the world was treating him like the innovator and me like the parasite. I started getting panic attacks, real ones, the kind that show up at 3 a.m. and make you think your chest is caving in. I'd wake up sweating, gasping for air, clawing at the bed sheets like I was drowning. Some nights I'd just sit on the floor with my back against the door, eyes wide open, until the sun came up. I remember one night in particular. It was raining outside hard, the kind of rain that turns the street into a river and makes you feel like the whole world is crying with you. I sat by the window in Ben's spare hoodie holding the original notebook, the one where I'd first sketched Clarity Link. The pages were curled and stained with coffee, but the handwriting was still there. My writing, my diagrams, and I remember whispering to myself, you're not crazy. You made this. That was the first time I didn't cry that week. Eventually, I hit bottom. And strangely, that's when things started to change. Ben sat me down one morning with 2 cups of coffee and a breakfast burrito. He barely knew how to cook. He didn't ask if I was okay. He just slid a laptop across the table. Look, he said, I know it feels like you lost, but you didn't. You still have the code. You still have the skills. You still have you. So either you sit here and rot or you rebuild. I didn't say anything. He unwrapped the burrito. Start over, Evan. Start smarter. The idea sounded insane at first. Why would I build again when Kyle had already poisoned the entire market? Why try to breathe life into something that had already been stolen and twisted? But then I opened my laptop. I clicked on my old folders, my backup files, my diagrams, and I saw something. There was still value here, not just in the app, but in the idea. Clarity Link wasn't just a prototype. It was a vision. Pure. Link was bloated and corporate and too VC. Polished. My version was lean, community-driven, real, and more than that. It wasn't just tutors anymore. I started thinking bigger. There were thousands of creators out there, artists, coaches, translators, fitness instructors, all trying to monetize one-on-one sessions without giving away a chunk to middlemen. What if Clarity Link became something broader? A platform for anyone to sell personalized expertise directly? I spent the next 6 weeks rebuilding from the ground up. New brand, new name, new structure. I called it Signal Spark. Ben helped me register a domain. A friend from college I hadn't talked to in years helped with the front-end polish. I tapped a guy from Reddit to help with a more secure payment system. Slowly, quietly, we stitched together a product. No ads, no social media posts, no drama. I wasn't trying to fight Kyle anymore. I was trying to outlast him. In the meantime, I also took some advice from a lawyer friend of Ben. We organized all the IP evidence, filed copyright claims, laid down some early legal groundwork. Not to sue immediately, but to be ready. Every time I thought about Kyle's smirk, I imagined what it would feel like to wipe it off his face in front of people who used to worship him, but that day would come later. Right now, I was still rebuilding, and rebuilding meant starting small. I launched Signal Spark in beta mode, just 10 users, all people I knew or had been referred to by friends. I wanted feedback, bug reports, real usage data, no flashy onboarding or VC decks, just a quiet test. And the crazy thing, they loved it. One guy, a guitar coach from Toronto, said it helped him double his weekly bookings. Another, a language tutor in Berlin, messaged me saying, "This feels like the future." Little by little, Signal Spark started growing. I didn't need a launch party. I didn't need hype. I just needed users who actually cared, and I had. One night around 2 a.m. I looked at the live dashboard and saw a notification. 100 session completed. I just sat there and stared at the number. 100 real sessions, no PR team, no Stanford credentials, no billion-dollar valuation, just me and my work. And then, right as things were stabilizing, the call came. It was from my dad. That alone was rare. I answered cautiously. "Hey." His voice was tight. Not angry, not excited, just tense. "You need to come home," he said. "Now, why?" "It's Kyle," he said. "Something's happened." There was a pause. Then he added, "And I think you're going to want to see it for yourself." I hung up and I stood there, phone still in hand, heart racing, because something told me this was the moment everything would change. The drive home felt surreal. It had been almost 5 months since I left. 5 months of silence, bitterness, and distance carved by betrayal. I wasn't even sure why I agreed to go back. Maybe I wanted to see for myself if something had really changed, or maybe a part of me still wanted to be seen, not by Kyle, but by the parents who had written me off like some failed lottery ticket. It was a 3-hour trip down winding highways and through empty suburbs that hadn't changed a bit. Same potholes, same gas station with the broken ice machine, same sleepy neighborhoods where the only difference between Tuesday and Sunday was how long the mail took to arrive. But I wasn't the same. When I finally pulled up to the house, I didn't feel like a son coming home. I felt like a man walking into a boardroom he was about to quietly dismantle. My dad opened the door before I knocked. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, a line of worry between his brows that hadn't been there before. He didn't say much, just nodded toward the living room. I stepped inside and was immediately hit with the smell of the same old lemon cleaner Mom always used, like the house had frozen in time. Except the silence was different. It wasn't the quiet of a lazy Sunday afternoon. It was the silence of tension, of secrets. I walked in and saw Kyle sitting on the couch, shoulders slumped, hair disheveled. He didn't even look up at me. That alone was jarring. Kyle never looked anything less than meticulously put together. This was a guy who'd once ironed his hoodie before a family dinner, but now he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Mom stood nearby, arms folded, eyes darting between us like she was waiting for a bomb to go off. No one spoke at first. Then Kyle muttered, "They pulled out." I blinked. "Who?" "The investors," he said. "All of them. Perlink seed round collapsed. The accelerator dropped us. Our legal counsel backed out. It's all gone." I just stood there. It took everything in me not to smile. Dad cleared his throat. Apparently one of the lead VCs got access to the code audit logs, and that journalist resurfaced her article with some new updates. It snowballed. Kay finally looked up at me then, and for the first time in my life, he didn't look superior or smug. He looked scared. "You did this," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "No," I said, "you did this. I just stopped covering for you." He didn't respond, just stared at the floor like it might open and swallow him whole. Mom spoke. "Next. Can't you just let this go? You made your point. What's the point of destroying your own brother's life?" I turned to her incredulous. "You think I'm destroying his life? He stole from me, lied to everyone, used me. He was just trying to make something of himself." She snapped. "You don't understand the pressure he's been under. You're so focused on revenge." I cut her off. "No, I'm focused on the truth." And for once, Dad didn't defend her. He just looked away. That's when I knew they weren't calling me home to warn me or apologize. They were hoping I'd stop, that I'd back off now that the empire was crumbling. But I wasn't done, because this wasn't about public shaming anymore. This wasn't about the investors or the news, articles or Twitter commentary. This was about setting the record straight permanently. After I left that night, I called Ben. "Is it time?" he asked. "Yeah." I said, "Let's build the presentation." We spent the next few weeks planning everything. This wasn't about rubbing Kyle's nose in failure. It was about reclaiming what I built. For real. No. More whispers. No more "maybe he helped" rumors. I wanted the world to know exactly how PureLink was born and exactly who gave it life. The opportunity came faster than I expected. Tanya, the journalist, reached out. Again, apparently the article had found its second wind after the VCs pulled out, and now a few tech ethics forums were buzzing with interest. One of them was hosting a panel in San Francisco. Ethics and innovation. Who really owns the idea? She asked if I wanted to speak. At first, I hesitated. Public speaking wasn't my thing. My palms got sweaty reading off index cards in high school. But this wasn't about giving a TED Talk. This was about planting a flag. "I'm in," I told her. Ben and I spent hours rehearsing. We didn't just want to tell a sad story about a brother stealing from his sibling. We wanted to show it. The receipts, the emails, the side-by-side comparisons, the Slack logs. Rishi even sent a written statement verifying everything he'd seen. We weren't just presenting a sob story. We were presenting evidence. The panel was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. tech. Writers, startup founders, a few venture firms, even students from Stanford and Berkeley. Tanya said some of the people who originally backed Kyle might even be in the audience. Perfect. That morning, I stood backstage in a dark blue button down, staring at the spotlight as the moderator introduced the session. My hands were cold, my throat dry, but when I stepped out and saw the room full of eyes looking up at me, something inside clicked. This wasn't fear. It was clarity. I started with a simple sentence. Hi, I'm Evan and I'm the guy behind the app you probably know as Pure Link. There was a ripple of whispers and then I told the story. No embellishments, no melodrama, just facts, dates, screenshots, descriptions. I walked through the early days of Clarity Link, how I shared it with my brother, how he mirrored the code base, how he tried to erase the origins but couldn't scrub the details. And then I dropped the final slide, Signal Spark, built by creators for creators from the ground up. No middlemen, no lies. The applause didn't come right away, but when it did, it wasn't just polite. It was real. After the panel, people came up to shake my hand, ask questions, invite me to coffee. One founder said he wanted to talk partnerships. Another said, I've seen dozens of pitch decks this year, and yours is the only one that felt like it came from the heart. I walked out of that building lighter than I'd felt in months. Not just because I'd won a battle, but because I had finally stepped out of Kyle's shadow. But Kyle wasn't done, because a week later, I got served a formal legal notice. Kyle was suing me for defamation. It was ridiculous. Every claim I'd made was backed by logs and files and data documentation. But this wasn't about winning in court. It was about intimidation. He was hoping to drown me in legal fees, force me to settle, shut me up. But what Kyle didn't know was that while he'd been busy pretending to be a founder, I'd quietly become one. Signal Spark had just secured its first round of funding funding from ethical backers who believed in transparency, not corporate spin. We weren't flush with cash, but we had enough to fight back, and I was ready. I wasn't the same kid he'd mocked in the kitchen for dropping out. I wasn't the ghost coding in silence while he gave interviews. I was building. I had traction. I had proof. And soon I'd have something even better, the upper hand, because Kyle had made a fatal mistake. He brought the fight to me in public, and now I was going to dismantle his last shred of credibility in front of the one audience he could never afford to lose. I didn't flinch when the legal notice arrived. If anything, I smiled because Kyle had finally played his last card and it was weak. A defamation suit against me, a man with logs, source code, contracts, backups, witnesses, and receipts was like throwing a wet match onto a bonfire and expecting it to snuff the flames. Still, I didn't act impulsively. We let it sit. My lawyer, Nina, a quiet, unshakable beast of a woman with the precision of a scalpel, reviewed the filing. She blinked once after reading the claims and said he just handed us the microphone. You ready to talk more than ever? I said step one was simple. File a countersuit, copyright infringement, IP, theft, fraudulent misrepresentation. We attached everything. The original Clarity Link files, metadata from my GitHub repo, chat logs, Rishi's audit, Mari's testimonials, Tanya's updated article now with over 100,000 shares, the conference footage Ben's notarized, statement from the early prototype phase, and then we did what Kyle would never expect. We took it public. Tanya ran the update first. Startup sibling. Scandal escalates. Original founder. Files copyright suit after defamation. Attempt. Her headline wasn't subtle. She didn't need to be. Every tech outlet followed within hours and the story exploded again. But this time no one came to Kyle's defense. Not the VCs, not the accelerators, not even our parents. Because this time I brought everything. On my own blog, I posted a full timeline, not just of the code base and the plagiarism, but of the personal betrayal. I wasn't trying to play the victim. I was telling the truth. And I ended the post with a link to Signal Spark's public beta. That link got 20,000 signups in 3 days. Then, and I spent every hour after that fighting to keep up with the traffic. New tutors, new creators. We had podcasters offering coaching, therapists opening safe space sessions, even musicians selling one-on-one lessons. The floodgates were open, and Signal Spark didn't just stay afloat, it thrived. Meanwhile, Kyle, he was drowning. It turned out his original Purelink code was riddled with bugs, half-patch modules he barely understood, and plagiarized logic he couldn't explain. With his co-founder gone, his dev team dissolved, and legal fees piling up, he did what Kyle always did. When things got hard, he vanished. By the time we got to court, he had already lost the public battle. Now he was about to lose the legal one. I sat in the courtroom across from him, the same room where they called roll and read out the cases in that stiff, echoing voice. Kay wouldn't even look at me. He looked hollow. No fancy blazer. No confident smirk. Just a deflated shell in a cheap suit his lawyer probably picked out for him. The judge was methodical, quiet, focused, and mercilessly efficient. The evidence was stacked too high to ignore. Our claim was airtight. Kyle's counter. Sue crumbled under 5 minutes of cross-examination. He admitted under oath that he had accessed my prototype and took inspiration from it. Inspiration, he said. The judge interrupted. Are you aware that copying code, UI structure, and user flow verbatim, even from a sibling, constitutes theft? Kyle nodded. His lawyer didn't even try to object. Judgment was ruled in my favor. Kyle was ordered to pay damages. The court mandated him to issue a public retraction, take down Purelink entirely, and cease development of any related educational tech based on the Clarity Link source for a minimum of 5 years. But none of that was the real victory. The real victory came a week later. My parents called. I didn't answer the first time or the second. On the third, I picked up. My mom's voice was thin, uncertain. Evan, we read the article, everything. We didn't know how bad it was. We didn't understand. No, I said you didn't want to understand. There was silence. Then a small broken sentence. We're proud of you. It didn't feel warm. It felt late. I didn't build Signal Spark to make you proud. I said I'd build it because I had something real to offer. You just couldn't see it until strangers told you it mattered. Another silence. Then we miss you. I ended the call without responding because some things once broken don't go back the same way. Signal Spark kept growing. Within a year, we had over 50,000 active users, a new office, a real team. We stayed independent. No VC interference. No corporate corruption. Just creators supporting creators. And every time someone asked how it started, I told the truth. Not to gloat, but because truth matters. A year later, I was invited to speak at another panel, Resilience in Tech Building After Betrayal. I stood on the same kind of stage Kyle once dreamed of in front of a sold-out room. I looked out at all those young founders, some scared, some skeptical, all hungry, and told them the story. All of it. I ended with the same line I told myself that night on Ben's couch back when I felt like nothing. You're not crazy. You made this. Afterward, a kid, maybe 19, just like I was, came up to me, hands shaking, eyes wide. My brother's trying to take credit for something I built. He said, no one believes me. I handed him my card. Now someone does. Last I heard, Kay moved across the country, took some forgettable job in middle management, deleted most of his social media. He never tried to rebuild, never apologized, and I never needed him to, because I didn't rebuild to get revenge. I rebuilt to remember who I was before. They made me forget, and when I look back now at the theft, the silence, the laughter, the courtroom, the applause, I don't feel bitter. I feel clear, because when you build something with your own hands, no one can take that away from you. Not forever, not even family. And when the truth finally shows up to the table, it doesn't shout. It just sits down and everyone else goes.